Alex Jones is one of the internet's most infamous political commentators.
That because it's just all background. But now that I have llamas, Emperor Palpatine was a little-known senator from Naboo, small planet. Now they look up to some twit instead of looking up to Thomas Jefferson or looking up to Nikola Tesla or looking up to Magellan. I mean, kids, Magellan's a lot cooler than Justin Bieber. I'll just say it, make fun of me all you want on CNN or wherever, but everyone already innately knows this. These people are not frickin' humans, okay? Hillary Clinton is a goddamn demon.
Now, I have a lot of disagreements with Alex Jones, but at least prior to the election of Donald Trump the second time, he took a lot of really interesting and often anti-imperialist stances. Very good stances. He was opposed to the U.S. invasion of Iraq and was calling out neoconservatism before it was cool, talking about the Trotskyite to neoconservative pipeline. He was critical of Israel before it was popular. All the way back in 2001, he was talking about the struggle of the Palestinian people for liberation and the crimes of Israel against them and how U.S. media covers them up and the justification that Israel uses for terrorism. And when Obama invaded Libya in 2011, he went there with Cynthia McKinney and announced that he was against the intervention. He said that normally he's opposed to communism, but this Gaddafi guy seems like he's pretty good. Now, he comes at things from a different angle, from a conspiratorial angle. And because of that, there's a lot of use of inflammatory language, and that can make what he says not the most trustworthy. There's a lot of paranoia and connections where there aren't there. But in many instances, if you look at even some of the most ridiculous viral moments, there is a layer of truth. But it's never acknowledged because, look, it's Alex Jones saying it, and he says it in probably the most ridiculous way you possibly can. Take, for instance...
And I'm not saying people didn't naturally have homosexual feelings. I'm not even getting into it. Quite frankly, I mean, give me a break. You think I'm like, shocked by it, so I'm up here bashing it because I don't like gay people? I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that?
Now, again, he's using some very funny language. It's a very odd way of putting it. But the claim about the gay frogs or whatever actually has a lot more behind it than you'd think. It's actually a very well-documented phenomenon. And it has been reported on by very reputable outlets that a lot of liberals even like NPR. And the rabbit hole goes very, very, very deep. So there's this herbicide called atrazine. It's produced by a company called Syngenta, which is a Chinese agricultural company, which is managed by a Nordic firm, by a firm headquartered in the Nordic countries. And it works by disrupting photosynthesis and killing weeds. It's sold to farmers to help kill weeds that only the crops will grow. So later, studies done by UC Berkeley found that it significantly disrupts the endocrine system of frogs, causing endocrine disruption. And 2/3 of frogs who were exposed to the chemical became infertile, and 1 in 10 became hermaphroditic, with many even going so far as to grow male frogs growing ovaries and beginning to hatch eggs. There is research suggesting that similar endocrine disruption occurs in humans. And I would like to note, however, that similar effects have been found by companies headquartered in America, by American agribusiness companies like Monsanto's product Roundup, for example, which have conveniently not been pulled from the market, like atrazine was in 2014. But the rabbit hole goes even deeper. In 2015, Syngenta filed a complaint against UC Berkeley, alleging that the lead researcher on these studies, T.B. Hayes, had been sending sexually explicit messages to their scientists, and those emails were initially put on Gawker, but have since been removed. I have no idea what they said. You can't find them anymore. And there are a whole bunch of articles saying to ignore them and that Syngenta had actually been threatening Hayes. And I'm not a scientist, and so I'm inclined to believe that this herbicide actually probably is harmful to humans. But again, the story goes much deeper than the meme would suggest. Alex could have used this to talk about how American agribusiness is allowed to get away with murder, how our leaders are failing to regulate effectively. But instead, he chooses to use the most incendiary rhetoric possible about gay bombs. I don't even know what a gay bomb is, but so nobody's gonna believe him. It just sounds funny. They're putting chemicals in the water to turn the frickin' frogs gay. And that's a major problem with the conspiratorial worldview. It can point to real truths, and it can point to things that are real, but if it comes down to a vast conspiracy, it opens up two very useful things for the ruling class. First is that all dissent begins to sound crazy because you're associating dissent with quote-unquote conspiracy theories and very strange claims by guys like Alex Jones about demons running the government or reptile people or, gay frogs, even though, apparently a lot of that research is actually more than true, or it points to some truths. And two, if there's a vast conspiracy running everything, if, all of our leaders are bought out, that there's no conflicts within the ruling class, if there's no class struggle, if there's no analysis going on, it's just that there's this vast conspiracy, then there's no hope and there's no reason to get politically involved. Let's take another, quote, less viral and more political claim from Alex Jones, and that would be the claim about FEMA camps.
Appears that they're going to go ahead and launch in the next 6 months to 2 years. It appears, this is one of the final pieces of the puzzle when they come out and announce, yes, camps for your safety. Camps, happy, fun places, but you'll have to work in the camps because the economy's bad. Service. So you have to be ready that if things are breaking down and falling apart, you won't have to go to the Superdome to be loaded on trucks and helicopters to be taken to a FEMA camp.
Now, Media Matters and a lot of liberal outlets at the time that Alex Jones was talking about FEMA camps, this would have been during the early Obama administration, they would say that the idea that the U.S. government would put American citizens in concentration camps is absolutely ridiculous, that there's no truth to it. But again, as in many instances with pre-Trump Alex Jones, there is a lot of truth to that claim. Everybody remembers Japanese internment. We're taught about it in history class, but it goes even deeper than that. Take, for instance, the McCarran Internal Security Act of 1950. Now, it was officially passed in 1954, but it was vetoed by President Truman, and actually, that veto was overturned again by Congress. This required all communist groups to register with the U.S. government. It also created a list of, quote, subversives, who, in the event of a national emergency, would be rounded up and imprisoned. Now, it was later found unconstitutional, but it remains on the books. Another instance of a similar case was Operation Garden Plot in 1968. 1968 was a year of massive unrest. With the assassination of Martin Luther King, the black community all across the country exploded in outrage, and riots happened all across America. The National Guard and the U.S. Army responded. They created procedures in the event of unrest for dealing with subversives and violently putting down racial dissent, which involved putting leaders in camps. Or, for example, there's Operation Rex 1984. In 1984, classified military exercises were leaked that included the creating of a list of 500,000 national security threats, which would be, in the event of a national emergency, rounded up and put in concentration camps. Now, Oliver North, who we may all remember from the Iran-Contra scandal, was questioned on it, and there's video of it on the internet, widely available. So what's true here? What's true is that the U.S. government has a history of flirting with fascist dictatorship and passing legislation meant to criticize dissent. There have been also several instances of the U.S. government making lists of subversive elements and practicing plans for dealing with them in the event of a national crisis. What's not true is that there is an all-powerful entity called the government that controls everything and has a plan to round up every American citizen to put in work camps. That's not true. And we should be having an actual conversation about protection of our civil liberties. We should be having a conversation about freedom of speech, about the right to protest, about freedom of association, about the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which has been used to round up and raid the homes of people who are associated with governments that the United States doesn't like Scott Ritter and the Uhuru movement, who simply for questioning American foreign policy as it relates to sending aid to the fascist country of Ukraine, a proxy for NATO's intervention against Russia, those people had their homes raided by the FBI. And Scott Ritter has also been debanked and is no longer able to do financial transactions within the United States. We could be having a conversation about that, but instead, if you listen to Alex Jones, you're packing up your backpack. You're doomsday prepping. Instead of actually getting involved in the political process, instead of getting together with your neighbors and telling them about how your freedoms are being taken away, instead of organizing your workplace, instead of creating a mass movement of ordinary Americans to oppose, now smug liberals get to point and laugh at you because they've never heard a propaganda talking point that they have never not thoughtfully observed, and you're not getting politically involved. You're not organizing a mass movement. Now, the point of this video is not to point and laugh at Alex Jones. It's not even to point to claims that he have made that have a grain of truth, even though, as we've discussed, many of them do. The point of this video is to point to a genuine problem that I have observed with anti-hegemonic and dissident spaces, and that is a tendency to fall into fantasy and the conspiratorial worldview. Now, this is not to say that there is no truth in conspiracy theories. As I've pointed out, there is a lot of truth in conspiracy theories, and that the U.S. government does a lot wrong, and the way in which our media reports to us is not entirely accurate. There is a layer of propaganda. But unfortunately, the conspiratorial worldview leads to hopelessness and a bunch of mindset problems. If you subscribe to the conspiratorial worldview, you come to believe that there is no hope, because if there is a giant, massive conspiracy going on, wherein there's no divisions within the ruling class, wherein there is no class struggle within it, wherein there's no way that you could feasibly get involved to stop the conspiracy. If everybody is part of this conspiracy, if there's only good people and people involved in the conspiracy, and if you discover that somehow any group is linked to the ruling class in any way, that they must be part of the conspiracy, well, then there's no way that you can change anything, because unfortunately, in order to really affect change, you have to affect people in power. And if you're not appealing to them on that basis, if you're simply saying, well, there's no hope, then there's no reason for you to do anything. And that's really good if you're an internet commentator, because all you'll end up doing is listening to podcasts. But if you want things to get better, you can't just rant and rave on the internet. You can't just find out about how so-and-so is secretly involved in the conspiracy, how so-and-so is connected to intelligence in X, Y, or Z way, and no shit, they're connected to intelligence. They're a member of the U.S. Congress. If you want to actually change things, you have to get involved. If we want things to get better, we need a mass movement of ordinary Americans that will demand a government of action that fights for working people. We need to fight against monopolism and Wall Street. And if you're interested in something like that, I'm part of a political organization. It's called the Center for Political Innovation, and I invite you to get involved. There'll be a link in the description.